And there was points I got to the stage where I didn't have a clue what I was doing anyway. You know, I phoned my husband to ask him where I was. He's like, my name is Debbie MARTIN-CONSANI and I am an ultra runner who lives in Glasgow. So I went from 10k to half marathon to a marathon, and I stumbled across a website for a race called the Devil of the Highlands. That was going to be my one and only ultra race, and yeah, 10 years later I'm still doing it and still finding new crazy races. Every time I do something, I want to find something longer and tougher and harder and something a bit more challenging. I never want to be that person who's just repeating races to chase a time. I would rather chase adventure and challenge. If a 10k trail race is your challenge, that's your performance edge. Or if it's running the spine race, I think there's just different challenges, different personal experiences. I like to do something that at least once a year that scares me, pushes me, and gives me that fear that I might not actually complete it. The race is Tour de Jaune. It starts and finishes in Courmayeur in the Italian Alps. It's 330 kilometers with a gazillion mountain passes to go over. It was one of those ones that looked amazing. Definitely one of the world's toughest races, but definitely not something that I would consider doing. So yeah, and there I was. I found myself on the start line in 2017 representing Montane. I think it's probably the most scared I've ever been gone into a race. I nearly DNF'd the flight. I was terrified. It was that great unknown, the sleep deprivation, the fatigue. I've never really had to deal with sleep deprivation before. My son slept like a teenager from the day one, so I've never really had to gone into the depths of fatigue. The furthest I'd run before then was 30 hours in Greece. It was just something that was a personal journey. It was an adventure. About 8-9 weeks before the race, I had represented Great Britain in a 24-hour race, which involved a flat 1 mile loop for 24 hours. So I probably didn't have enough mountain training in my legs. So once I'd recovered from the 24-hour race, and I use the term recovered quite loosely, I'd got myself out onto the hills, tried to get in as much ascent as possible. And if I'm brutally honest with myself, I'd probably done too much. I'd probably got to the overtrained stage. Going into the race, I already felt fatigue before I even started it. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that I was going to finish it, but it would have to be something quite big for me not to do it or not to complete it. What I say to myself quite often is, you don't know until you try. And usually things come good in the end if you just work your way through it. I think it's quite easy to find an excuse, but you've just got to work through it, and that's that is all part and parcel about endurance running. When I think back to my race and how I was practically crawling, going up hills and hanging over my poles, and you just think that people at the front of the race are just having the time of their life and they're skipping over hills and flying down descents, but when you look at the videos, you see that everyone goes through really bad patches and everyone has to work really hard at the end to finish it. You can't really think about the bigger picture or you'll go nuts, so I was just kind of breaking it down into 50k chunks, which can take anywhere from about 12 hours to 24 hours. By the time I got to the aid station, I was an absolute wreck, and the volunteers had to come out and pull me in, and they gave me blankets and foil blankets and sweet coffee. They made a makeshift cot at the back of the tent and forced me to sleep for an hour. That was kind of almost a race-ending moment for me. So yeah, I had a real stern word for myself and trying to look after myself better, because that was quite a frightening state that I'd got myself into. It was so cold, but the night was so clear and I was so high up that I couldn't actually distinguish between what was stars and what was the race reflective markers. I was using my poles as spears to try and stop me from falling, so every time I stumbled, these were actually protecting me from face planting, which was quite effective, albeit slightly unnerving because there was a massive drop at the left-hand side of me. Yeah, I think physically I felt okay. Mentally and emotionally I was completely gone. You know, I was dazed and confused and frustrated and fatigued and angry and probably on the cusp of hysteria by the time I'd got into the next checkpoint. And I remember the guys sitting me down and giving me some hot soup, and I physically couldn't hold the soup. I was throwing it everywhere because my hands were shaking so much, and that was probably the lowest part. And for me that was, you know, quite early in the morning, and I had this massive fear that I was going to have to go through another night. So I wanted to get in and out there as fast as possible, but the guys wouldn't let me go because obviously I was a bit of a wreck at that point, so they made me go to sleep. And yeah, I remember sleeping in this church hall with this guy standing over me making sure that I didn't move, and I slept for about 10 minutes and I wanted to get up, and he just pushed me back down and says, no, you need to sleep some more. And he woke me up like 20 minutes later, and I was so cold that I'd slept with all my clothes and my hood up. And I remember when I sat up, when I'd slept with my hood, I'd actually dribbled saliva inside the hood. So when I sat up, it just went all over me. When I was leaving that checkpoint, it was like someone had just poured cement into my legs, and my rucksack felt so heavy. But I just had to keep going, and I forced myself to run. And my lungs had been completely destroyed. The cold air, you know, the altitude, the fatigue, the sleep deprivation, and the pain in my lungs. I have never, ever felt anything like that. And just coughing and coughing, and I could see where I wanted to go, and I knew I had to keep driving and keep pushing myself to get there. And I had to keep telling myself, you know, if you're walking or running or crawling, you're one step further to the end. And then, you know, I saw Courmayeur and I burst out crying. And that was it. All downhill from there. I think I set myself a goal of knowing that there would have to be something quite catastrophic for me not to finish. And I'm quite good at pushing towards that goal. Sometimes you have to put ego and aspirations aside just to get the job done. The overriding goal was always just to finish. And nothing really stood in my way of me finishing, other than the fact that I was a little bit tired and I had a cough. So yeah, I think you're always tougher than you think you are, for sure. I think a lot of people underestimate their abilities of things that you can push through.
What would scare you now?
The spine. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you very much.